I had never really paid attention to the muscle tension that I was carrying and holding in my body, and never understood things, Cynthia, like having a tight belly can send a threat signal, a subtle one, to the brain that you're not okay, you're not safe. And so things like that were just mind blowing for me. And that all it takes are these subtle shifts in awareness and slowly, progressively releasing some of that outer tension in our larger muscles can do so much in freeing up the diaphragm and letting more breath in.
Hi, I am so pleased to be back in the interview seat. I have not really been interviewing since the last summit, but today I'm going to be bringing forward someone very special for us to listen to and maybe read a little bit about as well. So here we go with uh, adding to our roster of speakers, Aimee Zaring. She's a certified somatic stress release practitioner and award-winning author of Flavors from Home. Refugees in Kentucky share their stories and comfort foods. She has an MFA in writing from the Spalding University and has been a small business owner, English language educator, fourth generation Kentuckian. I love that. And has received grants from the Kentucky Foundation for Women and the Kentucky Arts Council. Hi, Aimee.
Hello, Cynthia.
Well, it's really good to be with you. And Aimee, Aimee, I just have,
Yes.
this is really well done. Really well done, girl, woman, whatever
Thank
you
you.
want to label.
Thank you.
I mean, really from the title and the graphic of the title all the way through the entire book, I just think you did great. And
Mm.
I like to think of myself as a writer, but there are writers and then there are writers. And when I read this, I was like, oh, she's like a real writer. Yeah,
I
really
try.
going on. And so I really want to talk about this book with you because I think this challenge of, first of all, part memoir, right? Um,
Mhm.
Laying out one's own journey in a way that is interesting and not overwhelming is big. So let's start there. Yeah. I mean, how was that for you to start laying out your journey and figuring out like what's my level of exposure that I can afford to do for myself and also for the reader?
Right. It was a very vulnerable book for me to write. I definitely came from more of a private family, keep your emotions close to the vest. And the idea of sharing this disorder of mine that had brought me so much shame and distress for almost a decade of my life was almost paralyzing at first. But then when you realize that there are other people out there that are going through something similar, then you kind of can put the ego aside. And this is the book that I wish I had read or somebody else had written for me so that I could have learned from it, and that there are so many other ways beyond, the typical talk therapy and prescription drugs that can bring healing to us. And so because I had so much luck with these three particular methods that I introduced, Feldenkrais being one of them in the book, I just really wanted to share that with others and to let them know that they're not beyond help and they're not beyond hope. And maybe they just haven't found that one thing that's going to lead them on their next stage of their healing process. And so when I was writing this book, I was still kind of in the healing process myself. And I really didn't understand somatic still. I didn't know what embodiment was or any of those terms. All I knew was that these things that had started to use and incorporate in my life were giving me a lot more freedom in my body and peace of mind and really easing my anxiety. And so, as I continued to write and research, I learned more and I was able to just synthesize it and finally get it out on paper. But it took a while. It was, probably a 7 year writing process and another year of the publication process. So, a lot, I'd like to tease sometimes this book was on life support so many times and I was about to pull the plug. But, just having support with other writers that were just cheering me on, my partner, just everybody, this message needs to get out there. So that's what kind of kept me at it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I knew it was a longer process, partly because I realized, okay, when I actually talked to you was quite a few years ago. So I knew it was
Yeah.
a process. And for me, I understand this needing to maybe make visible a little bit for other people what one went through without, uh, so that people can be inspired and realize that there's some possibilities, some hope. And then
Hmm.
also that struggle to go like, but what is too much for me? And also what is too much for the reader? And I feel like you struck just a really nice balance between yourself and your own journey, and without overwhelming the reader. Partly because you have a little sense of humor that you are
Hmm.
definitely interjecting as you go along, which I found really lovely and delightful. But also because you're telling really two or maybe three love stories as you go,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
stories are sort of interrupting um, the uh, trauma of it, I guess, of what was going on for you. But then also how you started with talk therapy, which I think is a great place for people to start. Totally feel it's a great place to start. But tell us a little bit about your experience with CBT.
Right. So talk therapy, and it's one of the gold standards for working through pretty much any mental, emotional distress, anguish, addictions. It's one of those evidence-based treatments, and so it's highly regarded. And I got a lot out of talk therapy as well. But over the years, Cynthia, I tried probably a dozen different approaches before I landed on somatic practices that really were starting to get effective. But I just, I said it's kind of like putting out glue traps in a cellar overrun by mice. Some of these things didn't seem to touch the level of disorder that I had going on. And I have to share with you that one of the things that I ran across in my research was your video, Reducing Noise in the Brain Using Feldenkrais. And you gave me so many gifts in that single video. And one of them was that you're not broken, you're simply continuing to learn and to grow. And I love that. And one of the other things was talking about a disorganized nervous system. And that is often the result of chronic pain and chronic anxiety and stress. And so to hear it phrased like that, I don't know, it's something about it took the stigma out of what I was experiencing. And I kind of looked at it like, oh, it's just like a little junk drawer that needs to be, decluttered and rearranged and organized. And so there was something very settling about that phrase for me. And your talk about quieting the noise in the nervous system. And that's what I feel like the cognitive approach or the top-down therapy wasn't able to address for me. These things that were running in the background beyond our conscious awareness, things that are held in our bodies. That's what I feel like cognitive approach, as great as it was in teaching me and giving me insight about why I was doing what I was doing, sometimes the why, the insight is not enough. And you need to go deeper into the roots of the problem, as you know so well, and what you do in your work.
Well, I do know it, but I experienced too, because I did a lot of CBT myself for childhood trauma, um and I mean, I loved my therapist. When I got serious and I settled into a therapist, I loved my therapist. I think she was very good. And I think I learned some extremely important life skills working with her, not just the analysis of why. I might be having the challenges I was having, but I think I learned some important life skills that maybe I didn't really give enough credit to when I came into somatics and I started to feel this incredible change in somatics. I think it is quite interesting because it's not like CBT doesn't give you things to do, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
just analyze, it gives us all kinds of things to do, maybe go for a walk, journal, uh,
Journaling was one of mine, yes.
journaling, maybe noticing your breath might have even been present then. I'm not quite sure in my time frame,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but for yours. But
Yeah.
there were, and really the ability to talk to someone and not be shamed, right? You,
Yes. To feel
it's
heard and seen. Yes, absolutely.
enormous. That's an enormous gift that psychotherapy of any type can give to someone. But it is fascinating that with those things and the myriad of other things I tried and the myriad of other things that you tried together, we'd probably have a list of maybe 20 or 30 things that, I went like, that's a little helpful. Yeah, yeah, okay. I don't know. Oh, I still got the really big problem. Okay, well, okay. So I'll try something else, right? But then this somatic practices just something very different, doesn't it? And you don't
Oh,
even know that you're working with the issue.
no, they're sneaky that way, aren't they? They're so subtle. It's like the art of subtlety. I remember when I first had my first awareness through movement class. I got to tell you, there was a little part of me that was looking around the room going, what, this is for somebody who's in major pain or has had, like that are healing from very, terrible physical events. And, how is this going to just slowly raising my shoulders up and down or doing these opposite circles with my ankle and wrist? How is this going to, help me? And so you've got to, kind of silence those voices a little bit and just go along with it. And I tell you what, though, by the end of that class, I was feeling taller, lighter, stronger, definitely more relaxed. I felt more organized, and whatever that meant, I didn't even have the words for that. It's like, what does that mean? I feel like more organized in my body. And what I didn't realize at the time, and I write about in my book, is there is very much an intense workout going on, but it's behind the scenes in your nervous system. And like you said, you don't even realize it's happening.
Yes. And I think you took your first class maybe with Dorothy Hennig.
Correct. In
Yeah.
Louisville, right?
Right. In Louisville. Right. Um, so yeah, I know she taught you very well and brought you through the method extremely well. Yeah, I think, I had a similar experience in my first class, and I had already done some variations of little bits of exploring the somatics, but not very much because I could hardly tolerate it actually. And
Mm.
then I went to this first, my second husband and I went to the first awareness through movement class, and very much like you, I was like, what is this? This is
What's
just
the
silly.
point? Yeah.
So I had such a fast nervous system. Boom, 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 boom. Right.
Yeah.
So all this slowing down. And then, the one does many interesting things with one's mind when you're brought up against something that's new and different. And for me at that time, I was still really struggling to let new and different in because it felt, I don't know if I would say it felt unsafe, but I think now I think maybe it did. And so when I'm doing these movements, I remember the first lesson was really a turning lesson. Turn your shoulders, your head, your eyes opposite directions. And I just kept thinking, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I
Yeah.
cannot believe I'm wasting my time on this. And then voila, right? You feel better.
Right.
And you're
And
like, what?
yeah, I can relate to that in every one of the somatic practices I've done. And there's also this element of feeling silly at first. Like, not only is this doing anything or, it's a waste of time, but especially with Linklater voice, with the first somatic practice that I encountered, and some of the, guttural sounds coming out of me, there was almost like a little bit of shyness, like, oh, I'm getting too intimate with myself. But it's like anything, it's coming back home to your body. Of course it felt unfamiliar because we live up in our thoughts and our headspace so much. And that is what we associate so much with our identity. And it's coming back home to the sensation, movement patterns, our posture, our breath, the heart rate, all these things that are working behind the scenes that are feeding our brains information all the time about, are we safe or is this threatening? And so, I do think that for somatics, and I'm not alone, and just as you said, you had kind of a similar experience, and other people that I have recommended to, I'm not sure about this, Aimee, but it's sticking with it over time and being consistent. And you never know what that one thing's going to be where, I suggested, my mom had some chronic back pain recently, and I had suggested a Feldenkrais video to her, Annie Tho, and she said, Aimee, I'm still using that exercise, that particular lesson to this day. It's one of the few things that really gives me relief. So you just never know. Maybe it's one thing, or one lesson, hit or miss. But again, you have to understand that it is still impacting your nervous system, feeding it new information, new sensory information that it's going to use in the future. And you don't know how or when or why, but that's kind of what Dorothy had shared with me too.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that that beginning phase of feeling uncomfortable or like you're really stepping out on an edge when you explore methods like this comes from the years of being taught to stay within a kind of a norm, a track? I I, I hear all the time people are like, I don't want to try something none of my friends have heard of. I don't want to try
Hmm.
something my doctor hasn't heard of. I don't want to try, and I think back on my own journey, and of course what happened is I got desperate enough to try other things. I
Right.
just got desperate, really. You just
Yeah.
get like, okay, I, I'm gonna have to try some of the things. And I think there's whether it's chronic pain or trauma or a compulsive habit, or I don't know, unable to do the things you used to be able to do,
Hmm.
an injury, wanting to be able to continue to play a musical instrument, but feeling like you're really struggling with your postural organization with that. I think all those things, mostly it's difficult when you are trying so hard to fit in to the culture, to
Right.
go in a direction that doesn't seem like it's been a stamp of approval on it.
Hmm. Exactly. And, there's hasn't been enough research done on these where, like one of my frustrations is usually, again, when we have a mental or emotional distress or, the first thing is prescription drugs or talk therapy, which again can be extremely helpful. But a lot of times when you're dealing with these stress related disorders or trauma, kind of approaching it through the body first can be very effective and allowing your body to feel safe and secure. And that's where the true learning can happen. So, yeah, I do think we're running and bumping up against a lot of these Western culture, where those have been prized, and there's not enough information or research done on these other ones, for the most part because of lack of funding. But it doesn't mean that those are less valuable or less effective. And in some cases, I think for me, if I had come upon somatic practices earlier on, that I wouldn't have suffered as much as I did. So, yeah, I do think, and then not only with our Western culture and mindset and, this go, go, go and goal oriented and philosophy that we have, I think we're bumping up against things in ourselves too that are hard to look at. And they're those shadow parts of ourselves that we're not maybe ready to look at. But then that's the good thing about somatics too. You don't have to be ready. You just move with awareness. And then, suddenly things are shifting.
Yeah, for sure, that's true. Yeah, I think there's, I used to say way back when, who comes to my practice before there was any online world. And I used to say, well, they have to be uh, desperate and a little bit open,
Yeah.
just like
Yes.
very much, but they do have to be just a little bit open. And
Hmm.
I think it's very difficult to go out the norm. So I just congratulate you for like really starting to seek out the things that you needed, whatever the impetus for that was. And uh, tell us a little bit about Linklater because you've done it. So let's hear a little
Hmm.
more.
Yeah. So it was developed by Kristen Linklater. She was a Shakespearean actor and an embodied voice instructor. She worked with a lot of famous celebrities too. It's basically an embodied vocal approach of working with breath and vibration and muscle tension reduction and all these things to help you connect with your natural voice. And Kristen Linklater believed that when you are connecting with your natural voice, you free you. So freeing your voice is freeing you. And, I came upon that through a painting actually that I saw in a restaurant. Again, I wasn't looking for relief from my disorder at the time. Actually, what brought me to Linklater was another issue I had with anxiety was public speaking. Here we are, Cynthia. And I was getting ready to publicize my first book, and I knew that I wanted to be, a good representative and spokesperson for the refugees that I had, written about. So I saw this painting, and it was for sale, and it was the artist was Drew Pilmer, who lives in Indiana, and I just saw that maybe this is an opportunity for me to get over my stage fright and to, get over my anxiety public speaking. So that was really the first way that I came around to somatics, and it was quite by accident. And sure enough, we started working together, and it did help tremendously. It did not help me get over my disorder, but what it did was helped relieve a lot of the anxiety that was driving my compulsive behavior. And it was, slowly educating me in somatics without me even knowing it. Drew never even used the word, this is a somatic practice. This is just, connecting to your breath. And I had never really paid attention to the muscle tension that I was carrying and holding in my body, and never understood things, Cynthia, like having a tight belly can send a threat signal, a subtle one, to the brain that you're not okay, you're not safe. And so things like that were just mind blowing for me. And that all it takes are these subtle shifts in awareness and slowly, progressively releasing some of that outer tension in our larger muscles can do so much in freeing up the diaphragm and letting more breath in. What I couldn't believe either is that somewhere I read 60–80% of us are shallow breathers, so that we're kind of just up in the third of our chest breathing, and a lot of us hold our breath not knowing. I mean, and particularly like as we're talking here in this interview, you're not taking as many breaks to pause and breathe. So just being aware of those things though was just so wonderful. And when I started freeing up my physical voice, what happened too was that my writing voice, my creative voice started opening up too. And where I'd felt stuck before with writing, it was like I was finding that communication channel was opening up. So I highly recommend it. It is one of those that can make you feel silly and what am I doing? But man, by the end of it, I felt a lot more freedom and space in my body.
Well, that's fascinating. And I think that, um, we don't, well, let me say first in Feldenkrais, many practitioners, and I don't know if Moshe said this directly, Moshe Feldenkrais, the creator of the Feldenkrais Method, but certainly I've heard many practitioners, senior practitioners talk about it. They were only going to get to teach one lesson out of all the myriad lessons that we have. It would be a lesson about breath. I
Mm,
mean, it's, so fundamental, right? So fundamental.
yes, yes.
Does not. require our ability to breathe.
And that's what's so amazing about somatic practices too. It's just, little to no cost, no drugs needed, and it's available to anyone at any time, and even if they have physical ailments or aren't very mobile, like you just said, to your point, you can work with your breath.
Absolutely. So also, I think I want to back up a little bit because I think you said something really important when you said, uh, but we could work through the body. And I think that, our language is such a big part of the problem that we have with understanding the power of this work. So, for example, when we when people hear those words, my body, the body, our, a body, I don't think they include the brain.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Include the brain. I don't think they include the emotional life. And so our understanding of what it is to be a human being is been so chunked down and dissected that we don't we've actually come to believe we are somehow a bunch of separate parts, even though of course we know we're not. We do know that cognitively on one level, but on another level we really do think there's my brain and there's my thinking and then there's my emotions and then there's my body and then there's my diaphragm.
Yeah.
Work like that, does it?
No. And, it was funny when I started really getting into somatics, there was a little bit of superiority. I was like, oh, like the power of the body is so much better than the mind, I'd almost flipped it around. And then I just really, I think it was Moshe Feldenkrais, I had read somewhere that he said every waking brain event or activity involves four things: thinking, sensing, feeling, moving. And I thought, and they happen concurrently, but we're lucky if we recognize one of them happening because we're always on autopilot. So seeing it like that as working together, the brain is sending a lot of messages down to our body, but the body is sending up maybe 80% or more information to the brain. So not that it's superior, but it's kind of our, first responder letting us know things. And then the reasoning mind can do its work, and reasoning and helping us figure out solutions. And it's definitely a holistic approach, somatics is, even though we're talking about these body-based practices, but it's absolutely bringing your thinking self online too. And especially with Feldenkrais, you really recognize that's the heart of it, is moving with awareness. And you're constantly differentiating between, does this feel, heavier or closer to the ground? And you're constantly being asked to pull all parts of yourself online and look at how every part affects the whole.
Yeah, of course, there's the famous quote from Moshe saying that he's not after flexible bodies, but flexible minds. And at the heart of the Feldenkrais work, and for sure, is actually opening up options so that we are not
Mm-hmm.
completely habitually moving. And I use the word moving in terms of our thought, moving in terms of our emotion, moving in terms of our physical body, mo- not not habitually moving in ways that actually either harm us or are at odds with what we intend to do. So people always think, well, it must be about just being able to reach for a cup. It's about getting over the shoulder pain, but it's the same thing that has happened to one that creates the habit for why you have now ended up with ongoing chronic shoulder pain is also present in the way you argue with your spouse every time, or is also present in how you get stage fright, or is also present and just goes on and on and on. So these are all habits, and
Yeah.
of course, habits are good, as we always like to say, you couldn't get out of bed in the morning without them. But they also
Right.
need regularly interrupted and re-examined if we're going to keep growing as human beings.
That's right. And like we touched on earlier, it happens so behind the scenes that you're being given these options. You know, like just in being asked to move in different ways. I think one time I was doing a integration lesson with Dorothy, and she realized she had one hand over here and she asked me to look this way, and it just kind of confused my body. And but after a few moments of relaxation technique and breathing, it opened up and freed up something in my body. So you're really through your body finding different pathways. And can I do this movement slower? Can I do it with more ease and less effort and less trying? And that's what really helped open things up for me and my disorder is, I kind of broke it down, what I was doing. And I had done enough somatic practices to realize, oh, this doesn't feel good in my body anymore. What once felt familiar, what once felt protective, and what was once self-regulating me, I now know, I have it in my body's memory what freedom of and flow feels like, and what brings more ease and pleasure and comfort. And it wasn't doing what I was doing. So there is that I think it happens again behind the scenes, but it was all along helping me see these other options at my disposal and helping me again know the difference. I think we get so familiar, like you were saying, we're all kind of running on this survival stress state all the time, and we're all kind of at this hyper aware, vigilant tone, and sometimes we don't even recognize it in ourselves because everybody else around us is operating at that fast pace.
It's the norm. So if that's the norm, then you don't notice it, right? Absolutely.
So
Person who
same is
really
true in our individual selves, like what we become familiar with and what once felt regulating or whatever started it, and what was for good self-protective purposes at first, that we get into these habits sometimes, that really they can work against us, and we need to get this new information in us to teach our nervous system what true freedom feels like.
Well, tell us a little about the second practice that you discovered that made such a difference for you.
Yes, bowspring. Isn't it funny, Cynthia? We've got Linklater, bowspring, and Feldenkrais, and I make a joke in the book. It's like, really? It's like another strange named practice, and it's not easy to describe either. And that's going back to somatics too. They're meant to be experienced, and it was quite the challenge trying to write about them. But bowspring was developed by two longtime yoga instructors, Desi Springer and John Friend, and it's a dynamic, curvy postural alignment system. And you can apply it to anything you're doing in your life. Like right now, I'm even trying to sit with a fuller belly. They really focus on open, expansive posturing, things that help bring you more confidence and freedom in the body. It also, what I think is unique about bowspring is its work with balancing and toning the fascia. And I know a lot of us, might have luck going to massages or the myofascial release things. There's definitely practices out there. But what I love about it is you can do it for yourself, on yourself at any time. And it's basically just the way you're holding yourself, some of the poses and pulsations and things that they're using. Before getting into somatics and researching this book, had no idea, Cynthia, about fascia. The connective tissue that holds everything together. And I had no idea that it too was sending signals about our safety and how spacious and hydrated we are and how tense we are. And that is sending signals. So, when we have more pliable fascia, we can move around with more ease. And it's also doing, again, some behind the scene work of just settling your nervous system. So it's a beautiful practice, and it's a lot about self-compassion. And it uses this radiant heart to feel compassion not only for yourself, but toward others. And it's really another one similar to Feldenkrais that can reduce a lot of physical pain, but in the some of the byproduct of that is also releasing and helping with the mental and emotional stuff that we have going on.
Yeah, sure. Well, and I love the way that you talk about John Friend as well, like really kind of being willing after investing his entire life in a particular way of exploring yoga to go, hmm, something here is different. There's something
Yeah.
here more to learn, to expand. And that quality of curiosity is just vital in order to be able to continue to grow and overcome what seem to be unovercomable obstacles or problems. You know, Aimee, you use a metaphor that a lot of us that were Tolkien fans, I think, will be familiar with, right? I was a big Tolkien fan in the books, and there was this character called Gollum.
Colin?
Gollum. Yeah, and you use this character of Gollum to help you, I think, somehow frame what was going on for yourself. Could you talk about that a little bit in your choice of that character?
Yes, well, he called the ring his precious, this thing that had once, hadn't been an issue, but then over time it became all consuming. And so that's, I kind of relate it to my disorder, my compulsive behavior, originally starting out pretty, tame and not an issue. And then over time, the more I focused on it, and what they say is the what you focus on expands, it became something kind of its own. I don't know, it had took on a life of its own. And so I kind of refer to it here and there as my precious. And I think we all have these preciouses in our life that when we don't pay attention to them and when we let them get out of hand, they can turn us away from the light and underground. And that's kind of why I refer to it as the precious.
Yeah, I personally really got the for me as I was reading it, and of course this is my own take on the Gollum character as well, is that he was somebody that was a normal person, right? In Tolkien's books, he was a normal person to begin
Mm-hmm.
with. That's shocking to really take in, but he was a normal person, and his attention got grabbed by something that he knew on one level was not good for him. He knew it from the very first.
Mm-hmm.
Did on one level know it was not good for him, but then he just didn't feel like he had any choice but to go ahead and just grab it, just to hold on to that ring, just to look at it, just a little bit. And he knows he shouldn't keep it in the beginning. So everybody's got a vice, everybody's got a habit, something like this. And then before you know it, he is completely enslaved by it. And it changes the very nature of who he is, doesn't it? He's not
Mm-hmm.
he's not at all recognizable as it plays out to the nth degree. So man, if there's motivation for any of us to look for a possible solution to that thing which is taken over and makes us feel ashamed, or that we hide, or that interferes with relationships, or that we feel we can't, move forward in our life. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was a really, I loved it. I loved it. Of course, I
Yeah.
was,
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that behavior had totally hijacked my life. So just so thankful that I was able to pull away from it and find these practices that helped me get out of it and see myself in my fullness and not just identify myself as, this person that has this disorder.
and then you made it to the Feldenkrais method, and I think you've already said quite a bit about that. But if you want to add anything a little bit to it, I'll let you jump in and do
Yeah.
that.
Well, and going back to bowspring real quick, I came upon that one by accident as well, just like with Linklater. But Feldenkrais was probably the first one that I came upon that I was truly seeking another somatic method. By then, I knew the word somatic. I knew the kinds of qualities of, I was looking for that had been helpful in regulating my nervous system up to that point. But after you've gone through something, some kind of behavior that you feel like you have no control over, and you're just starting to get better, some people might be able to compare this to an alcoholic and just, having recovered recently. You just still feel like you're moving a little gingerly in your body. You're just still not kind of trusting yourself. So I wanted to kind of pick up another practice, not that the others hadn't been beneficial or effective, but just kind of like covering all my bases. And what's funny is each one I go to for different things. It's like, it's kind of a cliche, but the tools in the toolbox. And, this one I can go for this. And I tell you what, with Feldenkrais, of all the methods that I've tried, that one is the most deeply calming for me and the most settling almost immediately with doing a lesson. I can, within a few minutes, I can feel completely relaxed. And, you and I talked about this a little bit too. Not all Feldenkrais lessons are meant to be calming and relaxing and softening. There's some can be agitating or, can be more enlivening. So that was something interesting too to know about somatics. It's not all about, rest and relaxation and calming, because we want to train the nervous system to be able to move fluidly between your sympathetic, the fight flight, and the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So yeah, it kind of helped me, whatever the window of tolerance they call it, to be able to widen that so that I can manage these daily stressors and these crazy emotions that happen throughout the day with more fluidity. And, that's another thing that Feldenkrais taught me.
Yeah. I think, for me, what I found is that there was something about the process of learning to observe myself that I got from the Feldenkrais method, learning to observe and be in my body, but also be observing myself. Both things. It's not a separate observation from the experience, which some practices are kind of a separate observation from the experience, but it's not. It's feeling, sensing to the degree that you feel safe enough to be in your body, which might not be very much in the beginning. But beginning to realize the pathways that occurs, almost like a reverse engineering process can go on. You learn kind of a reverse engineering process for noticing earlier in your day or earlier in the action where you're about to go off the rails and end up in trouble, instead of always noticing it after you're in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
The habit is for us to go, oh my God, man, I can't believe I'm back here doing this thing again. I know better. I didn't want to do it. And whatever that thing is, it could be a compulsive habit that one
Yeah.
has, but it can also be, again, the way that we step off of a curb or
Mm-hmm.
step and go, oh my knee, oh my knee, oh my knee, right? Over and over and
Yeah.
over.
Catching
But
yourself and choosing a healthier response.
that's right. Catching yourself and choosing even just
Yeah.
a response. You don't
Yeah.
even know you're yet, right?
Right. That's true.
You could choose something different. And then you
Yeah.
go, oh, that didn't really go where I wanted it to go. But you now have broken to some degree the incredible hold that is in that deeply ingrained habit, because then now that you've chosen at least one other response, you now have the chance to choose another and then another until really the whole fabric that has become so taut and pulling and it's so it just loosens and sort of starts to dissipate.
Yeah. Yeah. And it happens so naturally, it's, you don't, like we talked about it, you don't even recognize that it's happening until one day you're like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore, or it's not as severe as it used to be. And I also really love about somatics is how permissive it is. It just feels like you just have to answer to you. Sometimes there's some modeling. Bowspring probably has it more than Linklater and Feldenkrais, someone showing you some poses or moves, but generally not. And it's more like you're kind of wrapped up in your own little bubble of awareness. And it's so freeing because throughout our life we have to answer to so many people and we have so many obligations, and it's just like the true me self-care time, and I get to decide what feels better, and I get to decide what brings more comfort and ease, and no one's telling me what to do here. It's all about my timing and what's best for me. So that, I think, is attractive to some people that are willing to try it.
Mhm. Well, Aimee, it's just been such a pleasure to, as you say, explore with you your journey from survival to embodied flow. And I do highly recommend Aimee's book, especially for anybody who feels like you've been stuck in some kind of hypervigilance, some kind of traumatic background, or perhaps or some kind of trauma that's happened in your life, which trauma can be all different kinds of things. It doesn't have to all be the kinds of things we think of as trauma in the news, as well as maybe just generally anxious or have some compulsive habits. So totally recommend it. I think it's a great book. It's an easy and very interesting read. So that's fantastic. And I'm just so pleased for you, Aimee. I think back to when you showed up at my door and I think, oh gosh, she's come so far, so long. And
Cynthia, haven't I? Oh my gosh. I'm just thinking, it's come full circle because I was interviewing you and now you're interviewing me. And
right,
really, if people, they'll read about it, just my anxiety around speaking in public and knowing this might be going out into the universe. And yet I have been able to breathe through it. I've been able to stay secure in myself, and also having a wonderful interviewer helps. But I really want to thank you too, because I met all these people along my way and I couldn't have done it by myself, and you were definitely part of my healing journey and gave me so much wisdom and generosity with what you knew to share with me. So thank you very much.
quite welcome. By the way, you just won an award, didn't you? Shall we mention that?
Yes, yes. Literary Titan Gold Book Award for 2026. So not bad for the first month of the book being out. I'm thrilled.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Aimee, you don't live that far from me these days, I think.
I want to come see you. Yes, I'm just across the bridge.
Because of that big expensive bridge over the Ohio
Oh
River.
gosh. Yes, and you have something coming up in October that I would love to attend. So we'll talk more about that later.
Good. Thanks. Thanks so much, Aimee. And
Thank you.
bye
Thanks.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.